Champion International is celebrating 100 years of papermaking and a kind of success that founder Peter Thomson could only dream of. I'm Colleen Armstrong for TV Hamilton. Join us for a very special documentary.
We want to thank Champion and its employees for tremendous service to the Hamilton community over the past 100 years. This philosophy of being a part of the community, being actively involved at all times, started with its president, Peter Thompson, who was active and played a big role in having our YMCA, his grandson, Dwight Thompson, in recognition of the past presidents of Champion and what Hamilton and Champion meant to each other, donated 220 acres in 1963 for the Twin Run Golf Club. Champion was very instrumental in the development of PEX Edition in the Hamilton campus of Miami University, and has continued today to play an important role in Hamilton's progress, and we're counting on them for the next 100 years. They are very instrumental through programs such we saw with Harrison School today and Adopt a School. They've helped a lot with Shared Harvest in a food program. They do tutoring, and this is an involvement not only of the leadership of Champion, but also of all their employees. The company gets recognition, but that recognition wouldn't be possible if the employees didn't buy into the program of giving support to the community. This is done also through volunteering for Little League coaching, for United Way and other charitable institutions. The employees donate over $500,000 a year. The company also contributes significantly, so that what Champion and its employees have done for this community for the last 100 years is hard to put in perspective. It means so much to everybody. We're so thankful that it's happened, that they'll stay here, continue to contribute. And I'd like to call on two people now to say a few words. Dan Mayhew, who's Vice President of Operations at the plant, and Jeff Weber, who's Director of Public Information. Dan?
I'd like to accept this honor on the part of all the employees that have worked here at the Hamilton Mill, and in the true spirit of tomorrow, that's the employees that work here today. The community needs to know that we are committed to continuing to grow and improve our contributions to the community, and we are, in fact, committed to stay here and participate in this community. We thank you very much for the great honor you bestowed on us. Jeff?
I want to thank Lee and the Chamber of Commerce for a wonderful honor today. I can't think of a more meaningful gift that Champion could receive from the Chamber of Commerce than a historical marker. Every day now, passers-by will be able to share in Champion's history, and it will also stand as a symbol for the strong relationship that Champion has had with the business community over the years. I want to tell you that we talk about Champion, the spirit of tomorrow. As dreary a day as it is outside today, I think we have a lot of hope and things that we can be proud of when we look at the future. The kids from Harrison, for example, the talent and the excitement and the just the hope that they provide us for the future, for not only our next generation, but for the city of Hamilton. And I do want to add just a brief thank you to Lee, because Lee is, as most of you know, is kind of a semi-professional public speaker, and I'm not sure that Lee has ever taken the microphone and talked longer than I have, but I'm going to get off now and invite all of you to share in lunch across the street, and then we have also our historic memorabilia display is open for your enjoyment down on 3rd Street. So thanks again for being with us, and thank you for the honor.
Thank you, Jeff. Unfortunately, it's not possible for all of us to go out now to show our gift to Champion, the marker. We're going to go out now and do it, but you're invited if you want to come. to witness this, but if you want to look through the window, I wouldn't blame you a bit. So again, on behalf of the Chamber, we're glad to present this marker to Champion, to Dan and Jeff, and all the employees for all they've done for Hamilton. Thank you.
The one that lady champion was second in the Miami Valley, so we just kind of, we traded places in the two contests. But it was fun. Okay. Oh, that was cute. That was after my time. She's younger. Oh, I haven't seen any of those. I knew you was putting some of them in, but. Okay, I was looking at Patty Newman. Oh yes, yeah. Bill was an amateur photographer at that time, and he just to snap pictures.
Over there by it, Marilyn. Kind of turn around this way.
Oh gosh.
We're going the other side of it. We're going the other side of it.
Yeah.
There you go. That's
Okay.
nice. Good. Good.
Anything to
Hang on,
fly.
we're doing that. Don't leave us. Great.
Okay.
You realize that it's 1951, don't you?
We weren't going to say that.
We got an 81.
Run then. That a girl.
Hey Jean, here's Jeanette. She's over there.
Okay.
In that picture.
Point your picture.
Can nobody? What are you not doing a close up there, are you?
Yeah, there you go.
Let's do another one. Hang on.
Oh, you're back in the corner. Okay, I missed you.
Good.
Hey.
Great, thank you.
Hurry, have I made the movie yet?
Yeah, you're making movies right now.
We got pictures. We compliments. There's another one. I don't even feel like it. Nancy.
That's, what year would that be? 50s, maybe, or 60s. Immaculate.
Maryland's got the same thing.
Thank you very much.
You have been to the country store, right?
I haven't been down there yet. I've done there a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, they got a sweater over in the window too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on back. We wore these when we hiked. The camera, don't wait. No.
Thank you.
There was as many as 25 of us
It wouldn't fit me
walking down the
anymore.
street with our red jackets on. Every other Monday, like I said, rain or snow,
You walked from here to Thompson Park a couple
wherever
times?
we were
From
going
here
to eat,
7 miles?
roadside park down on 127, way down there in Sims Tavern.
Right.
Yeah. We went down there, and Arco Park. We went up there in a terrible storm one time. We had to strip and dry our clothes by the fireplace. We'll put that in there.
Aha! You got you now.
Linda.
Yeah.
Was that
Linda.
Linden in front. Linden in front.
One of those
Yeah.
little
Between.
streets.
Between.
Valleys like?
It was the
Linden.
last house that was in that whole block, wasn't it?
It's in the middle.
was in
It was
the middle.
between 3rd and 2nd
And
Street.
it was a double house.
Right.
And we wallpapered her wall.
Between second and third?
Community chest or something, buildings right along there.
Oh, okay, all right.
You make a left turn
Yeah.
there and right in the middle of that.
Yeah, I was thinking she lived over.
We house cleaned for, painted, fixed her all up.
Put
Now, how did you get?
And she was
how did
so
you get connected with
grateful.
her? Was she? Did you know her? Or
I
somebody
don't know
her?
who brought
When
that
I
up.
came in,
Before we got in.
And that was your initiation, you had to go visit her.
Okay.
Christmas time we put up a tree for her. She didn't have anything. She really
We had a shower with linens and things like
I had
that.
Charlotte to why she couldn't go, but we sent out a notice to everybody that belonged wherever they lived in the country.
And
They
they
sent a donation and they went out and bought stuff.
and they said everyone had to knit a square for that.
we did.
And then by the time they got it put together, they were ashamed to give it to her.
Everyone was
And
lopsided.
it's been in our chest and it's got moth holes in it by now.
Hi, I'm Jim Blunt, and here with Bob Shaney, and we're in a recreation of the Champion Company store, an institution that Champion started in 1917 and continued for about 17 years. One of the purposes of the store was to make sure that the company's employees, their paychecks went a little bit farther, and the company bought products at cost and sold them then to the employees with just a little extra charge to cover the cost of operating the store. It became quite an institution, and I'm sure Bob wasn't here at Champion at the time, but I'm sure he's heard some stories about the Champion store.
Yes. My father worked here since 1914, and many a trip we made to the company store, and we had a Champion had script that they paid you in script in part for the company store.
But these were like bus tokens would be today.
Like bus tokens or yes, company script, and you could buy anything, even a coal for heat your house with.
Tires for your car?
Tires for your car. The women could buy dresses, baby clothes, toys, sleds, you name it, in the Champion store sold it. And as you notice around the wall, we have reproduced many ads that Champion ran through the 20s, and they also sold watermelons. I don't know all the things they really did.
Really, they had about everything you could find in a department store then and now. And I've interviewed some people who said it was really one of the best department stores around because there was just everything here. They used the script, but you could also get, there was a credit system. You had to work, you had so much credit for every hour you worked or something?
That's right, and I don't know a whole lot about that part of it. I just come with my father when we come to the store, and the main purpose of the store was to save the employees 16% of what the going market was outside of the Champion store. Mm-hmm. And then just during the Depression, the Merchants Association had requested, I think, that Champion may want to give up the idea of the Champion store because it was hurting their business.
It was really a victim of its own success, and that is true that the merchants finally, when the worst of the Depression was over here, they asked Champion if they would consider closing it, and then they did.
That's correct.
One of the other things too was the convenience. We live in an age where we all have automobiles, and of course we're talking about 1917, and there were as late as 1930s there were only about 3,000 cars in all of the city of Hamilton. So an employee could stop by the store on the way home and take home whatever's needed for the meals for that day or the next day. So and they were riding buses and commuting and things of that nature. So there were a lot of pluses from that standpoint too.
Also, there was a lot of company houses on the outskirts of the Champion Mill, and a lot of fathers or workers rode bicycles to work, and they carried groceries home on their bicycle, this kind of thing. So it was a convenience for them. Like he said, the transportation system was very low, and even the streetcars. I think the streetcar, traction car did come up past the edge of Champion, I think.
Yeah. Traction line went through here, even, yes. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of things that the store did that would be recognizable today. They also had specials around Easter and Christmas and all the holidays, and some of that is reflected in the ads that are around this room. What were you trying to do with this display, basically?
We were just trying to recreate the old company store and kind of we're trying to go back 100 years, and this was one of their prime things. And I'd say that the 1,400 or 1,500 employees back during the company store days, it was convenience for them and saved a lot of trips, and it brings back a lot of memories to grandsons, granddaughters, and sons and daughters that grew up under a Champion family.
One of the differences in this company store and some that people may have read and heard about in other places, that some places the company store was the only store in town, and therefore the employees were kind of beholden to it. That was not the case with Champion. They did have the choice of patronizing neighborhood and downtown stores. That's one of the things that made this one a little bit different from the smaller towns where the company may have owned all the houses and the store as well. Bob, I bet you've run into quite a few employees who never heard of the company store.
That's right. A lot of the employees working right now that's got 20, 25 years, and a lot of people that's come in so far didn't know there was such a thing existed, because you got to remember the store went out of business, in 1937, I believe, so somewhere along there, and you take from 1940 to 93, you're talking 43 years, 53 years of age. So a lot of the young workers didn't know such a thing existed, and that's why we're trying to create kind of an interest. And Mr. Fitton, who was president of First National Bank, was just in here, and Mr. Ballou from Beckett Paper or Hammer Mill. They said they're going to have to come over and spend more time because this brings back old memories, this company store thing. And they've also seen a lot of pictures of their old friends throughout the store. And I might add one thing about stores. We're talking about stores, that if you worked at Champion back in the 30s and 40s, you didn't have no trouble getting credit, even at other grocery stores or at clothing stores and that type thing. If you said Champion, that was a magic word, and it's very easy for you to get credit.
I know, Bob, you came to work here after service in World War II, but we had a conversation one time about the Depression, and you told me a little bit about your family experiences during the Depression when your father was working here. Could you share those with us?
Well, a little bit of, I used to come down what we call the Champion Belt Line. A lot of us boys used to bring our dad's lunch in a lunchbox, and of course they kept their milk or whatever they drank cold, because the water fountains at Champion used to run 24 hours a day, and it was a funnel type thing, and they would keep their drinks cold that way. And then of course we got a ride. Sometimes we'd get a ride the Champion train back because I lived on the west side. And another thing,
you lived in Armandale?
I lived in what was called Armandale, and even that train supported a lot of people, because a lot of chicken houses and a lot of barns on the farms were built out of the Champion clay boards, we call them. You know, the leftover boards where they ship clay in to Champion. And the fathers back then, we didn't, and I doubt the company store ever sold an orange or maybe a banana, because our fathers, when they would eat their lunch, they'd always save part of their Twinkie or whatever the cake was they had, or if they had a banana, they'd save part of that for the kids when they come home. And they rode bicycles, and most of them rode bicycles, and we'd meet them to get what was in their lunch box. And some guys that did have a car, some of the fathers that did have a car, us boys would meet them down the corner, and maybe 5 or 6 of us would hang on the running boards, because the running boards, the old cars, were strong, really tough.
I think you told me one time about your father was one of the few people that was working because he was a Champion employee during the Depression.
I grew up in a poor neighborhood, and my father was one of the few in the neighborhood that worked. In fact, our neighborhood was so poor, and this was before the time of free book matches, that many a time we'd loan a shovel of hot coals to one of the neighbors so they could start a fire in their stove, because we heated up pot-bellied stoves back then. And we always had, our family was always looked up to, because we was one of the few in the neighborhood that our father had a job. In fact, back right after, in the late 20s, my dad, along with some of the other veterans of World War I, got a bonus. And my sister and myself got a bicycle. And we loaned our bicycle out because all of them thought we was rich kids, because our family, was employed at Champion.
Any other things you remember about the Depression? Champion worked during the Depression. There was always making paper, even though they couldn't sell it, as I understand.
They made paper, and my dad would come home so tired during the Depression that he'd fall asleep in the chair. We'd take his shoes off, and the family always gathered around the old battery-operated radio to listen to Lowell Thomas and the news, and Amos and Andy was a big thing back at that time.
Good. Thank you. We've been sharing some memories of not only the Champion store, but working in Champion during the 1930s. We are in the memorabilia room of the Champion Centennial celebration in an office on North 3rd Street, and we have with us today a man who's been associated with Champion in many ways, and especially as mill manager, Bill Larson. Bill, what are you doing now? What's your occupation?
Well, I'm a retired farmer. Run a few beef cattle and enjoy life.
And your career with Champion began in the 1950s, is that correct?
1953, right here at Hamilton Mill.
What was that first job?
Technician in the technical department.
And how long were you moved about with Champion and finally ended up back here about 13 years as mill manager? What were some of your other jobs?
Well, worked here in technical and in production, and was production manager. Went to Pasadena Mill for a couple of years to run the paper mill. Came back to Knightsbridge on general staff. Came back to the mill and was mill manager for 13 years. Then went to the great state of Connecticut at Stamford.
The corporate headquarters.
And into the materials department for several years before retiring.
You were here when one of the real legends of Champion was in charge, Reuben Robertson Jr. What are some of your memories of Reuben Robertson Jr.?
Reuben was president while I was here, and it seemed like it was only a short period of time. I guess it was about 4 years prior to his accident and demise. There was Reuben and several others there at what is now called the Stone Building was corporate headquarters, and you could see Reuben coming and going in that Cadillac, and he was always on a fast pace wherever he went. He had a briefcase for each mill, which was 3 at the time, and they all stood on his credenza, and you could see him standing up in the window in the corner office, and he was either on the phone poking in one briefcase or another, but he was quite a gentleman.
I understand he had a knack for knowing people and remembering people. It was probably, if he had devoted his time to politics, would have been a great asset.
Right. His memory was phenomenal, and several of my friends would have had an occasion to meet him, and they maybe 3 or 4 years later chance meeting again on a business reason, and he'd call them by their first name just as though he met them yesterday.
Who were some of the other memorable people that you worked with here in Hamilton at both Knightsbridge and the mill?
Well, you had Leo Geiser. Leo was in many ways Mr. Champion here, and then moved on down to Knightsbridge. John Zimmerman was mill manager when I was here, and Bob Stevenson and Earl Jones, all in turn were mill managers, and were good paper makers, were great people, and I think all of them thought an awful lot about the employees and wanted to make sure that everything was going as well for the employees as it was for the company. I think that was a great mark of Champion.
Champion has always been an integral member of this community, and now as a retired person you can probably talk a little bit better than some of the people here now. Some of the things that Champion has done for Hamilton over the years other than provide jobs.
Well, you know, when I first came to town, Champion was had quite a commitment for local government, and we had Art Wilson as mayor, and Bud Newkirk, and others, and there was always Cal Skillman on the school board, Frank Thompson on the school board, and there was always that feeling of strong commitment that the company had for the community in which they operated.
And I think I interviewed one person one time who said that he was given direction by Reuben Jr. and others that he was to spend company time on community projects. That was expected of you.
Yes. Yeah, they spent quite a bit of time on company time, on community projects. There were so many that were on there. Don Adams in United Way for years and years and years, and others. Carl Ben Detson had the United Way 1 year, if you'll remember. And there was always that responsibility toward assisting the community in all their endeavors. And there is still some of that goes on.
On the papermaking side, what have been some of the big changes that you have witnessed in your career?
Well, periodically changes in the paper mill equipment. Here at Hamilton, speed up of machines, replacement of entire forming sections of machines, new style coaters that apply the coating right on the paper machine instead of the off-machine coaters, which really started the Hamilton mill. And then in the other mills, I think the culmination of it now is the very advanced modern bleaching in the mills such as Pensacola, Cortland, and the other mills are now coming to oxygen bleaching, which eliminates the need for chlorine and all the bad parts about that. In the paper mill, it's the modern high-speed machines that are coating right on the machines and have twin wires and those things that we never even thought about back 35, 40 years ago. And these machines are producing on one machine more than this whole mill would produce in a given day. Very good quality, very precise, very well engineered. And then in the finishing areas, we now have, right here at Hamilton, sheeters, precision sheeters, where you can put one or more rolls on the back and the paper will come off all counted, all precision sheeted, sorted electronically so that the finished product comes off the end of the production line, wrapped automatically, and thereby through advancements where we used to have approaching 3,800 people back when I started, this mill is now down to something like 1,400, I believe.
And one of those reductions has been in one of those fabled groups known as the sorters. How many sorters were there around when you first started? I think there's about 4 or 5 now.
I think there was 550 women that were sorting in both number 1 mill and number 2 mill when I first came to the mill.
And that involved turning each sheet of paper, inspecting each one individually, and making a judgment on whether it should be shipped or not. One final question here. A name that was synonymous with this mill, and I think still is Chrome Coat.
Hamilton Mill is the home of Chrome Coat, that very unique and elite and shiny surface, which is the best printing surface in the world. It is still going, it's going strong, and it will continue to go on into the future. And there have been others who have tried to copy and duplicate, but they still can't get that same result that you can get the way Champion does it here at Hamilton.
Good. Thank you, Bill, and we'll reserve the rest of your time to go back to your farm.
You're welcome. Good to see you again.
Good. Thank you.
Right.
We're with Dottie Regal here, and we're going to talk about kind of a different aspect of working at Champion, and to a large extent, that's what happens after work. Dottie, you came to Champion not for a job, but for something else, right?
For fun.
For fun.
Yeah. In a lot of the activity program. I was always in sports. In fact, when I was like 13, 14 years old, I pitched horseshoes with the men's league that had a Champion team in it out in East Hamilton. And so I started with sports from there, pitching, I guess. And so then I went on to playing softball, and eventually in school and all that, you know, anything in activities, I had to get into it. And one reason is because you could do it for nothing. You didn't have to pay, because anything I had to pay for, I just had to sit down. So I took advantage of all that and really enjoyed it, and played with teams against the Champion, and had the opportunity then to come over here at Champion to work. And Ernie Nelson, in charge of activities, he went to bat for me, and next day he called me, come over, and it was all arranged. So I went back and told Kroger on Wednesday that Friday was my last. Oh, well, anyway, I said, yeah, I got to go over there. I got to play ball. And so I played on the softball team that summer. In the fall, it was the basketball and the bowling. And eventually I got into their golf program. And it was all just wonderful, just really wonderful. And Champion has been behind everything in our sports program. And again, I said it cost you nothing. They paid for your uniforms, your shoes, the glove, socks, whatever it took to get on that team to play, jackets and what. And they did the same thing with the basketball. And you was all set up to just have yourself a good time. And when you're having a good time, you play better.
How about work, too? You work better, too, when you're having fun, don't you?
That's right. I worked a lot better because I enjoyed the people around me. I had a nice job and had nice people to work with. And, well, I could just never say anything against my employment for the 43 years,
right.
You know.
You're retired now, but you worked here 43 years, and tell us a little bit about the jobs that you held here. And
well, I was in the finishing office where they trimmed the paper down a packet to send out to the customers. And, of course, I typed up the orders and distributed it to the field men there to get the job out. And would check it out for the salesman. And if there were problems, you called them, and they always took care of it for you. And that was the main part with the finishing area. And you were busy all the time there, and we were real happy about that, because when you were busy, you had customers that you were satisfying. And so then I moved on when we had Black Friday at Champion. The number 2 mill was done away with, and they offered me several jobs in the coating mill, but it was shift work, and I couldn't be too active with shift work, so I went to the credit union. And I was there, what you might say, 28 years with the credit union. And I worked in the various areas there with the tellers, the loan supervisors, and in marketing. And had the opportunity in 1985 to start their Friendship 5-0 group that traveled. And I'm still active with that. I go over and take part in that still in my retirement. So I'm still seeing people that I worked with years ago, and this just like this displays and things here is brings back a lot of memories with some of the people that you're actually in contact with. So it has been a real good experience for me.
And you earned recognition to the Champion Hall of Fame for your athletic achievements, and also the Butler County Sports Hall of Fame. What are some of your biggest memories and most treasured memories from your sports activity?
From the sports, well, being in tournaments. Now, I was in the softball tournament and played against National Cash Register in Dayton at Columbus. So they right away, they could take to the state tournament 2 players that didn't belong to them. So I was asked to go along with them to do the pitching, and I became a member of the NCR travel team, and that was real exciting. I didn't even have a car or anything. They came to Hamilton and get me and go wherever we went to, and so that was real exciting. And I had a no-hitter, and of course that's just like making a hole in one, you know. So that was real exciting for me, and just to get a team on the field and win the ball game, or win the basketball game, or win that golf thing. That was exciting every time. Not just the first time it happens, but every time it was exciting, and we had a lot of good players on our teams too.
Did that competitive spirit from sports spill over into the mill? People who were participating in the various teams?
I think so, because just like our bowling team, for instance, was a representative team. They had a mill league, but you had to have certain averages to get on the representative team, so it did.
That was true also with the softball and basketball. There have always been a mill league, and then there were representative men's and women's softball teams. And
the women's softball and basketball teams, they didn't have a mill league.
Right.
But people that wanted to, I had a girl here yesterday say, you probably won't remember this, but she said, I played right field and the ball was hit to me and I just prayed to God I could catch it. She said, I don't know why they even let me play. I said, we got to have people on the bench too. And she said she would never forget that. And so it was an opportunity for just about anybody that really wanted to participate.
You weren't didn't find sports challenging enough, I guess, so you also joined a group called the Fleetfoot Tribe.
Oh, yeah.
Can you give us just about a minute on that group?
Oh, yeah, the Fleetfoot Tribe has a lot of fond memories because we went a lot of places and did a lot of things, and one of our main things to do was we had a lady that was a crippled lady that couldn't get out and do anything, and we sort of more or less, like somebody said, did you adopt her? Because we did do quite a bit for her. We remodeled a little house for her and put new fixtures up, and go check on her and take her food, and got her glasses, had the doctor go down and examine for glasses, and bought television put in for her that she didn't know what was happening on the outside world. And I think that did our heart more good than anything with that. But we had lots and lots of fun hiking in the rain or snow or whatever.
I was going to say the basic purpose is with a hikers group, right? It started back in the 30s.
Yes, it did.
We think that walking is
1931.
And there's still some people around who were members of that first group.
There's 7 of us left. And we still go every other Monday. And we still have our 5-year reunions. So 65th is coming up. And we have people coming from like Georgia, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Indiana, anywhere in Ohio. So they're still all real interested and get real excited when they come back.
Good. Thank you very much for sharing some of your memories and experiences as a Champion employee, and also after hours a Champion employee. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. I enjoyed it all.
Good.
Thank you. Okay.
with Elaine Holman now, and we're going to talk about some other aspects of working at Champion, and that is health and family services, an area that she's been very active in. Elaine, you've been at Champion for a while.
I've been with Champion since 1954. I had graduated from Ohio State, so this was my first job and has been my only job through all these years. And basically all of my time has been spent within the Human Resources Department.
Tell us a little bit about what you're doing here today during the open house with Health and Family Services.
Today, in the cafeteria, we are highlighting our newly integrated Health and Family Services program, and that is basically the umbrella for our Work and Family Task Force, our Health Services Department, our Employee Assistance Program, and our Retired Employee Assistance Program. And actually, what all of these programs are meant to do is to provide prevention, early intervention, and disability management for our employees. All of us have the common goal of an outcome of a productive employee who is mentally well and physically well.
But this extends also to their families as well, right?
Yes, all of these programs do extend to the families, which would mean the spouse, of course, and the children.
Mm-hmm. We're going to talk to some other people about various aspects of the program, but you mentioned this is an umbrella. What comes under that umbrella?
The umbrella is what I mentioned before, the Work and Family, EAP, Retired Employee Assistance Program, and Health Services.
Good. Thank you. Your full-time occupation here has been with Human Resources, so you have got a track record of working with people here, right?
Right, and that's been an enjoyable part of my life. I probably work more closely with people within the Employee Assistance Program than I ever have, because I'm actually dealing with the employees who may have personal problems that affect both their family lives and their work lives, and we try to assist them in resolving those problems.
Without giving names, of course, can you give us some examples of some ways that specific employees have been helped, some problems that maybe they've had or something like that?
We've helped employees who are chemically dependent, meaning alcohol and other drugs, illegal drugs. We have worked with families who are having marital difficulties, financial problems, family problems such as child behavior. Actually, it's a broad brush program that covers just about any problem that you might have within your family, and the fact that it does affect, your home life and your work life.
Probably had some people who've been counseled and come back to help work in the program too, I would imagine.
Yes, we do have an EAP steering committee, and some of those people have participated in the program and are very active in helping other employees resolve their problems. We do also allow support groups within Hamilton to use our facilities. We have 4 Alcoholics Anonymous groups who meet in the EAP conference room. We have an Emotions Anonymous group that meets there, and we have a Narcotics Anonymous group that meets there. So we do open up our help to the community too.
Obviously, cost involved with this. How is this financed?
The cost is extremely minimal with regard to what we get back in return for a healthy and mentally well employee. I can't give you exact figures, but as I said, it's a very minimum expense considering the return that we get on our money.
And of course, Champion would not be here 100 years if it had not been concerned with its employees over that period.
Actually, Peter G. Thompson, when he founded the company, believed in a physically and mentally well employee, and that philosophy has existed with Champion throughout the years, and we're very proud as a group under the Health and Family Services to be able to carry that on.
Some of the things you've mentioned here are either unique to Champion or Champion has been a pioneer in these areas.
It is unique to Champion and a pioneer in many areas. I believe the Retired Employee Assistance Program may still be the only one in existence. Champion may have the only REAP program within the country where it's a network of retirees helping one another, and we have someone who will be talking about that. Basically, the Employee Assistance Program has been in effect since 1981 as a broad brush program, and I believe Mr. Guthman will talk to you about the length of time the Health Services and Health and Fitness Center has been here.
Well, thank you very much. We've been talking to Elaine Holman about another aspect of working at Champion. We're with Charlotte Brockman to talk about the Retirement Assistance Program and also to talk about her career as a Champion employee, which came to an end about a year ago. You retired less than a year ago.
May the 1st of 1993.
And before that, you were working on an area Champion that kind of become legendary around here.
Well, that's right. When I started at Champion in 1950, there were about 250 sorters. And we peaked at about 500 sorters. Now it's down to about 15 sorters.
Okay. For those that aren't familiar with Champion operation, tell us what the sorter, what was the job of the sorter? They had a big responsibility.
They inspected the sheet paper and counted it and for the customer, and they took out defects from the paper.
Mm-hmm. So it was really the check on quality inspection, and they did it one sheet at a time, too.
Right. Mm-hmm. It was one sheet at a time, and when everyone was at their station working, it looked like a big sea of waves just going across the room.
Mm-hmm. So. Working conditions changed while you were here on the sorting line?
Well, we had a lot of changes since I started on the sorting line, and you just adapt to them. Mm-hmm. And some of them you may not like them, but you have to adapt. If you can't make changes, then you become obsolete yourself. Mm-hmm. So,
speaking of changes, what's retirement been like?
Wonderful. I recommend it to everybody. So, but I had a goal. I knew that I was going to work till I was 65, and I wanted to complete my 43 years. So I did that the last of April and 1st of May of last year. Then I retired.
Mm-hmm. So now you're involved with the Retirement Assistance Program. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've been very active since I've retired, and I've worked with the Retired Assistance Program, and I'm on the network committee, and that is the senior retired people helping each other. Mm-hmm. And we have a benefits day over with Elaine in her office, and once a week we go over there and we help the employees who are having problems with their benefits and help them fill out their papers and get them to the proper places. And then we have the helpline, and one person mans the helpline.
I imagine you're talking about a telephone assistance program?
Right. Mm-hmm. It's we have a telephone number, and they call it the helpline, mm-hmm. and the REAP helpline. And so they, if they have a problem and they need help, then they call in and they leave a message, and then the person who is manning that will call and get their message if they need transportation to the doctor, or if they need to go to the grocery or something like that.
So just common, ordinary day-to-day activities.
We help people who need help. And then we have the health fair, and it's going to be for a year. I mean, it's going to be an annual event. Mm-hmm. Last year, I think, was the first time. And so it's going to be an annual event, mm-hmm. and it helps people with blood pressure checks and cholesterol, and we have different agencies out there who bring their paraphernalia and pass it out, and just try to steer the elderly people in the right direction.
For somebody out there who wants to call that helpline, as we end up here, give us that telephone number if you can remember.
868-4145. 868-4145 is the REAP helpline.
Okay. Thank you very much. We've been talking about Retired Assistance Program here at Champion. We're here with Bruce Guthman and going to talk about health services at Champion. Bruce, tell us specifically what kind of services would you offer if I came to your facility?
Health services is basically our terminology for a comprehensive wellness program. As Elaine mentioned, we focus on prevention, early intervention, and disability management, specifically in the area of cardiovascular disease, musculoskeletal strains, and sprains. One key component of our program is the preventive care plan. which basically empowers the employee with the knowledge of illnesses and injuries that they are susceptible to based on their age and their gender, and then providing health screenings to determine if they are at risk, and if they are at risk, providing the early intervention to return them to a state of, quote, wellness.
So the first thing that you would do for me would be to do a kind of health profile, what problems I've had and where I stand at this point.
Certainly. One aspect of our program is we have a 10,000 square foot exercise facility which opened in 1987. If someone wanted to come in and access that aspect of the program of exercise, then we would provide what we call a physiological profile to determine where they're at right now, and then where they need to be, and work with them with their interests in how we get to that state of wellness.
Mm-hmm. And when we speak of Champion, we usually think of the Hamilton Mill, but your services extend beyond that.
Absolutely. We service both the Hamilton Mill and Knightsbridge employees, retirees, and their spouses.
So we were talking at least about 2,300 employees plus unknown number of retirees.
That's correct. We have the largest population of retirees throughout Champion. Locally, we have 1,200 retirees that access our program.
Mm-hmm. And has employee response been acceptable to this program?
Employee response has been real good. We have aggregate participation in some aspect of our program on the Knightsbridge side, in excess of 53% of the population, and at the Hamilton Mill in excess of 46%.
Mm-hmm. Those are impressive numbers. We've been talking about health services at Champion, not only at the Hamilton Mill, but Knightsbridge with Bruce Guthman. We're with Lena Saylor talking about yet another aspect of employee services at Champion. Lena, let's start by, first of all, where do you work and what are your responsibilities?
I work at Knightsbridge. I'm an employee assistance coordinator at the Knightsbridge complex. Mm-hmm. And I've been with Champion we will be 25 years this year.
All those years at Knightsbridge?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And your responsibilities in this program is the basically family, work and family related.
Mm-hmm. Well, Elaine and I partnered together to co-sponsor the work and family efforts at the Hamilton Mill and Knightsbridge. Mm-hmm. And we think it's one of the most exciting things. And just to talk a little bit about what families and some of the things that we see going on in families today, as far as in the EAP program, we see the family marital, family children, aging parents, and as our three top problems mm-hmm. for our employees. Mm-hmm. And when I started with Champion, I was a single parent with 2 children. I needed good benefits, and that's how I started. Then I married a mill employee, and together we have 62 years of service. But family issues are some of our mm-hmm. biggest concerns.
And I would assume that the Champion employees are rather typical of the population in the wide range of problems
yes.
that you see.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What are probably the top 2 or 3 problems that you encounter?
Well, as I said, it's family marital, family children, mm-hmm. Aging parents are our top 3. Stress, shift work. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we want to address as a team. Our work-family team, we've been in existence since 1987, and it's a cross-functional team between the Hamilton Mill and Knightsbridge. Mm-hmm. And we have exempt, non-exempt, and hourly employees on our team. Mm-hmm. And we try to identify all of those issues that we feel that we can make an impact mm-hmm. as far as helping our employees balance work and family mm-hmm. issues.
An employee who has a problem or thinks they has a problem, do they find you or do you find them, or a little bit of both?
Well, it's a little bit of well, no, they come to us. Mm-hmm. But really, on our work-family team, they can call or contact any of the team members and bring issues up. We also have a newsletter, the Champion Family Matters, that we publish once a quarter, and we try to address issues like stress in the family mm-hmm. and try to help in some of those areas. We also, as a team, address the child care issue, and our team decided to choose 4 C's, Comprehensive Community Child Care, as our referral service. We partnered with them to try to develop more family care service mm-hmm. For our employees, especially our shift workers.
Mm-hmm. And what type of response are you getting from employees?
Very good. We're doing very well in that area.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any ideas of your numbers or total?
3% of the population.
And again, is that typical of cross-section of the community, would you say?
Yes, I would say so.
Good. Thank you very much. We've been talking here about various aspects of Champion employee assistance, and of course the family is a major concern. This is Jim Blunt. It's Saturday morning, April 16th, 1994, a significant date because it was 100 years ago yesterday on April 15th of 1894 that Peter G. Thompson and 9 employees started the production at the Champion Coated Paper Company here in Hamilton. So we're here today at the official 100th anniversary celebration, and also today is the first day of the second 100 years of Champion in Hamilton. We will have some of those ceremonies for you later on, and also we will continue with more interviews of champions of the past and the present.
Yeah, it's good.
Showing him, giving the show the stuff they dare show me. That's right. Try to control this thing. More work been done in this place. It's marvelous.
Oh, isn't it amazing?
Just great.
Retirees work hard.
President Champion.
Yeah, very good.
What a day.
I was going to say, this really straightened up.
He's in the hospital, but he's doing pretty good right now. One of our fellows was helping us set little samples.
I'm gonna last 14 years. I went to the East.
Well, that's all right.
Not because we wanted to.
16 years, 17 years we lived here.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right if you left us, but we'll excuse you for that. We like to.
Never forgot you though.
Oh, okay, that's the best thing.
Let the guy here he comes again.
Get it out of my trunk. My car's right there too. Stick it in there, and then I'll catch it. At this time, I would like to introduce to you the Superintendent of the Hamilton City Schools, Janet Baker, who will begin today's musical presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here on this beautiful day celebrating Champion's 100th birthday. Earlier in the week, I was invited over to see the displays, and it was like coming home again to see pictures of friends and relatives who have worked at Champion for an entire lifetime. And it truly struck me that Champion is the very fiber and fabric of our community. I think we've all heard the words of the popular song that goes, "Celebrate, celebrate, let's dance to the music." Today, we're here to do exactly that, to celebrate a milestone in Champion's history. We have students from Harrison Elementary School. We have Harrison's show choir and their Arts in Motion students here who will be celebrating with music and art. By the way, Harrison School is Champion's Adopt a School program, and I can tell you that Champion employees make a difference in Harrison Elementary students' lives every day.
Some people race, some people bury in their face. Like that man knows what you can hear within the mystery of his ways. Don't underestimate one thing I know. Everybody's got a seed to sow. Let your heart of hearts take you down the road. Everybody's got a seed to sow.
On behalf of the Hamilton City Schools and the over 10,000 students in our school system, we wish Champion International a very happy birthday and a prosperous future.
This is your 100th anniversary. Special thanks to the Hamilton High Instrumental Ensemble and the students from Champion's Adopt a School, Harrison Elementary, for their fine musical performance leading up to this ceremony. And now, here to sing our national anthem is Hamilton High sophomore Denise Dittman. Denise?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the
Thank you, Denise. Let me introduce those with whom I have the privilege of sharing the podium on this momentous day for Champion and for the city of Hamilton, Ohio. On my far left is the President of the Butler County Commissioners, the Honorable Courtney Combs. To his right is the U.S. Representative from Ohio's 8th District, the Honorable Congressman John Boehner. To Congressman Boehner's right is our mill manager here in Hamilton, Dan Mayhew. On my right is the President, Chief Operating Officer of Champion International Corporation, Whitey Heist. On his right is the Mayor of the City of Hamilton, the Honorable Chuck Furman. And on his right, representing Ohio's Governor George Voinovich, is the Governor's Assistant, Chip Gerhardt. Thank you all for being a part of our celebration, and we look forward to your comments. 100 is a number which has many meanings. As children, receiving a 100 meant we'd achieved a perfect test score. On a summer day in southwestern Ohio, 100 means crank up the air conditioning. And for Champion, 100 means a century of hard work, commitment to employees and community alike, and a special milestone in years, not only to reflect on the past, but to challenge the future. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you the President and Chief Operating Officer of Champion, Whitey Heist.
Thank you, Jeff. I am very pleased to be here today to help celebrate our 100th anniversary. Some months ago, in planning for today's event, we asked Dwight Thompson, a former chairman of the company and grandson of our founder, to be with us for this special occasion. Dwight told us, however, that he can't travel as well as he used to and sent his regards and his regrets for his absence. In preparing for today's festivities, I wrestled with finding the right words for what this special day means to all of us. Dwight came to my rescue. I received a letter from him that puts everything in proper perspective, and I'd like to share it with you. Dear Whitey, I'm truly sorry that I can't be with you all today to celebrate Champion's 100th birthday. You're all aware that the Thompson family has deep roots in Hamilton. This was the spot which my grandfather, Peter G. Thompson, picked for his coating mill in 1893. He chose this location because it had nearby paper mills, water, a skilled workforce, transportation, and a growing printing industry in this area. In September of 1938, I started what was to become a 42-year career with Champion. It began in the chemistry lab and included time working throughout the mill. I worked days, I worked shifts, and I had a great time doing it. I had a great time because of the folks with whom I worked. Once they had checked me out via the many ways they used on every new hand, they decided that the founder's grandson was okay. Then they shared with me their know-how, their techniques, their political views, and everything else. To me, it was a moving experience to earn their approval. Champion's history is a good example of America's industrial progress, a true Horatio Alger story. The courageous small businessman who built a coating mill, then bought a paper mill, moved the paper machines next to the coaters. Then he established a pulp mill in Canton, North Carolina to supply Hamilton with pulp, followed by paper machines in Canton, and then purchased woodlands to back up that mill. The company didn't stop there, as it added a mill in Pasadena, Texas, and in the early 1970s built the modern mill in Cortland, Alabama. While all of that was going on, we established a sales and distribution system to peddle a wide variety of products we manufactured. It all started right here in Hamilton with the first roll of paper in April of 1894. But our history doesn't stop with lands and buildings and equipment. The basic philosophy of any company's management is just as important. At Champion, it involves equitable consideration of our employees, thoughtful planning for the future, and contributions to the well-being of the community where we operate. In my personal opinion, the company's philosophy is as important as its material assets. In Hamilton, I believe this philosophy has been self-evident. It was conceived by our founder and carried out by the founder's family, Champion management, and the folks that now work here. It includes responsibilities on a national, state, and local level, with no level being more important than the others. It can range from serving as Deputy Secretary of Defense to be a volunteer fireman or coaching a Little League baseball team. Today, our employees carry on the tradition of giving back to the Hamilton community started by my grandfather, Peter G. Thompson. Here we are then, gathered today to blow out the 100 candles on our cake. We're celebrating a century of good times and bad, war and peace, and fires and floods. The fact that we're still up and around strikes me as a very good sign for what the next 100 years will bring. I'm pleased to have played a small role in that first century, both as a Champion employee and, more importantly, as a Champion employee who was involved in community activities. Thank you all for honoring Champion by your presence here today. Dwight Thompson. I think you'll agree that Dwight captured the very special relationship that we have with the city of Hamilton. Personally, I feel a great deal of pride in the fact that as the company grew and passed from a family-owned business to what it is today, we have been able to maintain that same commitment to community involvement and the desire to change the business to meet current trends as our founder had when he started the company. I think we'll all agree that Hamilton Champions have always embodied the spirit of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitey. Next, we will hear from our mill manager here in Hamilton, Dan Mayhew. Dan?
Thanks, Jeff. There's a couple people I'd like to recognize out there, the visitors from Stamford, our Executive Vice President of the Printing and Writing Division, of which the Hamilton Mill is a part, Bill Birchfield, and the Vice President of Manufacturing for the Printing and Writing Division, Mo Aslan, a newcomer. And I don't know if he's here, but representing, I'm sure he's around here somewhere, representing the UPIU, our international representative, Ken Stanifer. I want to extend my personal welcome to all of you on behalf of all of the employees of the Hamilton Mill. I had the same problem as Whitey in preparing for my comments today, and I decided to keep it simple and tell you about the spirit of the Hamilton Mill. As Vice President and Operation Manager for the last 2 years, I've come to realize the sense of history that exists in this mill. I still hear people talk about the Thompsons and the Robertsons. And of course, there's a few new names thrown in: Andy Ziegler, Whitey Heist, and Ken Nichols. I'd like to think that 100 years from now, when our future employees celebrate their 200th anniversary, more names will have been added to that list. When we started planning for this event quite a while ago, we searched to come up with a slogan to use for our celebration. We wanted to recognize the fact that we've been in business for 100 years, but we also wanted to tell everyone that we are focused on the future of the Hamilton Mill. The slogan, Champion 100, the spirit of tomorrow, is the one we chose. The slogan gives us a sense of history that brings us all together here today, yet it conveys our commitment to the future. During the past 100 years, as Dwight indicated in his letter to Whitey, we've had to overcome floods, fires, wars, and economic crisis. Today, business conditions, consumer trends, and environmental concerns continue to change. In response, the Hamilton Mill has had to change the products we make, how we make them, and to whom we sell. We know that we must and we will continue to meet the challenges that lie ahead. That's what the spirit of tomorrow means to us at the Hamilton Mill. I know Jeff told me to keep my comments in line, so for the few minutes I have left, I want to take just a moment to look backward. A few months ago, we determined that we needed to have a new sign message to inform our workforce of special announcements and concerns. We decided to build the structure directly across from the stage on which you see the open house message today. But the sign has much more significance than communication. We'd like to take the opportunity to dedicate this new edition at the Hamilton Mill to the thousands and thousands of Champion employees and their families who've contributed to the success of this mill and to Champion International. We respect the accomplishments of those past and commit our efforts to secure the future of those to come. Thanks for coming. We appreciate your support.
Thank you, Dan. Our next speaker is the Honorable Mayor of the City of Hamilton, and I might add, a former mill employee, Chuck Furman. Chuck?
Thank you, Jeff. The opportunity to be involved in this prestigious 100-year celebration is indeed an honor. On behalf of the citizens of Hamilton and Hamilton City Council, I would like to present this proclamation. During the week of April 11th through the 16th, 1994, Champion will be celebrating its 100th years. The company and its employees have unselfishly and generously given their time, talents, and financial resources to numerous civic and community organizations which have made Hamilton and Butler County an exceptional community within which to live and raise a family. Now, therefore, I, Charles R. Furman, Mayor of the City of Hamilton, Ohio, do hereby proclaim the week of April the 11th through April 16th, 1994, as the 100th anniversary of Champion International Corporation Week in the City of Hamilton, Ohio, and on behalf of the City Council, congratulate Champion International Corporation for its 100 years of distinguished corporate leadership and express to the community and its employees our appreciation for the many profound contributions they have made to our community. Thank you.
Dan, I think he'll probably give that to you later on, so he's new at this mayor stuff. Thanks, Mayor Furman. Now we will hear from the President of the Butler County Commissioners, a man whose public service extends well beyond the city limits, the Honorable Courtney Combs. Courtney?
Thank you, Jeff, and welcome, Whitey. We appreciate you being here today. You know, I was born and raised in Hamilton, Ohio, down in 2nd Ward, and the memories of Champion go very, very deep. We didn't call it Champion, we call it the Mill, and there's a lot of stories about what went on in the mill. My wife's uncle, Wally Auld, spent over 40 years working for Champion, never lost a day's work, and was proud of that. He's been retired for many years, but he still has Champion in his heart. Champion runs through his blood. And many of you employees are the same way. Years of service and proud service. And the accomplishment of the employees and Champion and what they've done for this city. City of Hamilton wouldn't be what it is without Champion. It goes from the very day they began up until today. Jeff Weber, very involved, is there, he's seen. He wants to make this a better community, and that's important to each and every one of us. With us today, I have my co-commissioner, Sally Southard, is over on this side. I would like to, thank you. We were here last Monday to present the plaque across the street, and the whistle was blowing. And for all of us who grew up in Hamilton, that was a very familiar sound, one that I hadn't heard in many years and brings back a lot of good memories. And Hal Shepard, city manager, and I were talking. When the 5 to 5 whistle went off, you better be heading for home. And when the 5 o'clock whistle went off, you better be at your table eating dinner. And we all knew that, and all the kids in Hamilton knew that. And that just brings back so many good memories and fond memories of what the mill is all about. And it was good to hear that whistle again. We have a proclamation for Champion. The Champion Coated Paper Company, incorporated November 1893 by Peter G. Thompson, began production in a new coating mill on 7 Mile Pike, now North B Street, April the 15th, 1894. The first coated paper was shipped May 4th, 1894 by a horse-drawn drone. Champion opened a new paper mill June the 7th, 1902, and 5 years later entered the uncoated paper market, opening a second paper mill. And whereas Peter G. Thompson, a lifelong advocate of fitness, subscribed the first $10,000 in 1910 in a campaign to finance a new YMCA in Hamilton, eventually contributing over $40,000 towards the construction and the building, which is still the Hamilton Central YMCA. And whereas Champion established itself as an individual leader by opening a medical department with a full-time physician in 1919 and a research department in 1926. And whereas by 1920, the Champion Mill brought attention to Hamilton and Butler County by its status as the largest in the world devoted to the manufacture of coated paper, with more than 60 acres of roof space. And whereas Champion Paper and Fiber Company opened a new office complex named Knightsbridge in August of 1961. In 1991, Champion completed a $45 million expansion to its Knightsbridge facility. And whereas in December 1989, the Hamilton Mill became the first paper mill in North America to recycle 100% of its solid paper-making waste and boiler ash, instead of dumping materials in landfills, earning a National Environmental Award from the American Paper Institute and the National Forest Production Association. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, Courtney E. Combs, Janet Clemens, and Sally Southard, Commissioners of Butler County, Ohio, do hereby proclaim this week of April 11th to the 16th, 1994, as Champion International Corporation-Re, in recognition that throughout its 100 years, Champion and its employees have followed the tradition of its founder by generously contributing time, talent, leadership, and money to numerous community causes and programs in Butler County and vicinity. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you, the county thanks you, and we all thank you, the Champion Mill and its employees, for 100 years. We look forward to the next 100 years. Thank you very much.
Recognize a couple of city council men out there in the audience. We've got Don Stewart and Lynn Kincaid. Say hi to everybody. Our next speaker spends a great deal of time in Washington, D.C., but he is certainly no stranger to Hamilton nor to Champion. The Honorable Congressman from Ohio's 8th District, our good friend John Boehner. John?
Happy birthday to the students and the parents from Harrison Elementary. Congratulations on a job well done. And to those Champion employees who spend time with the students at Harrison Elementary, thank you for taking a more active role in your community. For a century, Hamilton has been the foundation of Hamilton's economic community. Its 100-year history has been an inspiring story of private and public interest working as partners, some might even say family, to achieve the very best. The Champion experience here stands as an excellent example of American enterprise at its finest. When Peter G. Thompson began his operation 100 years ago, the city provided a tremendously supportive home for the fledgling business. And over the years, the company earned a dramatic degree of success which it graciously and repeatedly put back into the community in its times of need. The spirit, the ingenuity, discipline, and sense of community displayed by Champion International, and most importantly, its workers, during this past century are a great source of pride to us all. And I'm certain that this will still be the case when our children's children come and gather in Hamilton many years from now to celebrate Champion's bicentennial. So on behalf of myself and the 570,000 people who make up the 8th Congressional District of Ohio, we want to say congratulations to Champion and congratulations to the people of Hamilton for a job well done. And to celebrate the occasion, I have flown a flag over the Capitol of the United States to present to the mayor to celebrate 100 years of success for Champion here in Hamilton. Good luck.
Thank you, Congressman Boehner. By now, you've most likely gathered that the governor is not here. So in his absence, his assistant, Chip Gerhardt, will do his best impersonation of Governor Voinovich. Chip is a good friend to Champion, and I've known him for a number of years, and we appreciate you pitch hitting today. Chip?
Thank you, Jeff. The governor sends his apologies for not being able to make it today, but he had to remain in Columbus to attend to some serious business. But he asked me to come down and present a proclamation to Mr. Heist, a token of Ohio's appreciation. We are honored to be here to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Champion, one of the great corporate citizens not only of Hamilton, Ohio, but this great state and the entire United States. Here's hoping that your next century is as successful as your past. And on behalf of George Voinovich, the citizens of the state of Ohio, it's my honor to present this proclamation to you, Mr. Heist. Thank you very much. Good luck and God bless.
Thank you, Chip. Why don't we all just take a minute and thank all of our special guests for being with us and being a part of this ceremony. As we close this ceremony, let's look toward the future and envision a similar ceremony in the year 2094 with our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren celebrating another milestone of success for Champion and Hamilton and the state of Ohio. Thank you. Enjoy the mill tour and other anniversary activities, but first we're going to start the second 100 years of Champion, much like just about every workday started around here in Hamilton for many, many years, to the sound of the old Champion steam whistle.
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
We need 3 minutes until the steam whistle goes up. Apparently my watch is off. Well, let's have a little music. Any of you kids that want to join Billy the Beaver out there, go ahead and dance. Let's think positive. I hear it. All right.
guys gonna be on Channel 18?
Look, say hi. Say hi.
Your protection. Maybe that's it.
Is that where you're walking to?
Okay, take care of yourself.
It's April 20th, and we're in the fifth day of Champion's second 100 years, and winding up the Centennial celebration. And with us now is a gentleman who was responsible for much of the activity over the last 10 days, and he's certainly looking a little bit better than he did Saturday during the open house tour. Bob Barrett.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, it was an interesting assignment, but let me correct one thing. I was in charge of it, but I had an awful lot of good help.
Mm-hmm. And the planning really started almost 2 years in advance, as I recall.
It took us about 2 years. So we started with a committee of 12 people, and I think you were one of the 12, and had an awfully good time of planning this, but it did take an awful lot of detailed work, and we did, I think, put an organization and a program together that really worked quite well.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes during that 2 years, it seemed like it was 100 years coming.
It sure was, but the results was worth it, I think.
One of the highlights, of course, was the tour and open house. Do you have some type of an idea how many people participated?
It was difficult to count because we just had them coming all day long, but it's a steady stream of people. We know we gave out close to 5,000 sets of earplugs, and some people, I think, did not take the earplugs and went to the memorabilia. So we're estimating it's probably between 6,500 and 7,000 people that went through the tour.
Of course, the tour emphasized the business of the company, the paper making. One of the other aspects was the memorabilia, and that became quite a chore and also a hit.
As far as we're concerned, that was probably the most exciting part of the tour. I mean, yes, it's interesting that people want to see where we make paper, and a lot of the employees showed their families and their wives and kids where they work at. But our retired employees put together an exhibit that just was first class. They went back and dug out a lot of just great history about the company, and it was really something I think that got much better than we even thought. We thought from the beginning it was going to be just an exhibit. It turned into more than that. Mm-hmm. It was really a lot of the history and just an awful lot of the great things that happened through the years at Champion.
I think one of the highlights of the memorabilia was the emphasis on the family connections to Champion, and of course your connections with Champion go back beyond your own employment here. Is that correct?
That's right. I think most people who know Champion or have been a part of it, Champion has touched the lives of just about everybody in Hamilton, and certainly there's an awful lot of people like my family and a lot of other families that there's been 3 and 4 and 5 generations that have worked here during the 100 years. And so there's a lot of people who are awful proud of how Champion has been their place of employment for so many years.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'd be correct in saying that this has re-emphasized the pride that people have or brought some new pride to Champion people.
Well, I think it's very definitely done that. I think that the Champion pride has always been here, you know, being around Hamilton a long time, but it certainly gave it a rebirth. I think we've seen an awful lot of energy this week. I know I've been very busy answering calls, you know, telling me how well they thought the program went. And again, let me emphasize, it wasn't just me. There was a lot of people that did this.
Your own employment at Champion began when?
I started, this dates me a little bit, but I started just out of college back in 1956. So I'll be here 38 years in June.
And what was that first job?
Well, I came in as sort of a communications aide and sort of doing a lot of things in the Industrial Relations Department. And soon after that became editor of CHIPS and stayed with the Industrial Relations Department for about 6 or 8 years.
And you've had several other positions since then, and of course now you're back with CHIPS.
Yeah, from there I went out and became a general supervisor in the converting department and ran the distribution center as manager for about 14 years, and got asked to do some communications work and public affairs work about 6 years ago, and so I've been doing that for the past 6 years.
From your viewpoint, what's the strength of this company?
Oh, I think that it's the people. This whole celebration was about people. And I think from that standpoint, our people have been the strength of Champion. And if you read, as you know, looking at Peter G. Thompson's writings and so forth, his philosophy from the very beginning was we will only accomplish things through people. Mm-hmm. And I know Dan Mayhew now has that same philosophy.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I know you've been interested in and been involved in recently is contact with customers, which is a major emphasis here. Can you give us a brief summary of what that involves?
Yeah, that's a fun part of my job. We have what we call a market talk program here at Champion, and what that means is we take our employees, and I'm not talking about our supervisors and our technical people, but we take employees on the job out to see the customer, and they become a part of the sales team then, and they come back and work on projects that will help the customer. Our total program is trying to sell quality through the eyes of the customer. Employee cannot do anything about that. A worker cannot do anything about that unless they understand what that customer needs and why he needs it. And I think we've emphasized that the last few years, and it's certainly begun to pay off. Our quality and service to the customer is much, much improved. One thing I might add, and Jim, this is important, I think, as we talk about the 100th anniversary celebration. As you know, when we started, we said we wanted to do not just a celebration for historical facts, but we wanted to try to do something that would mean not just history, but something for the future. And our theme that we developed from the very beginning was Champion 100, the Spirit of Tomorrow. And as we developed the 100th anniversary celebration, we went into a four-prong approach. We wanted to do something, obviously, for our employees. We wanted to do something for the community. We wanted to do something for our customers. And not the least, we wanted to do something for the kids of the community. So that was the Spirit of Tomorrow.
So here we are with the beginning the Spirit of Tomorrow, and with Champion's look ahead at hopefully another 100 years in Hamilton. We'd like for you to meet Bill Compton, who represents the family element of Champion. How long has your family been connected with Champion?
Since 1907.
And how many generations does that represent?
4.
Starting with your...
My great-grandfather, Bruce.
And what was his capacity here? How did he get here?
He was hired by Champion when they built number 2 mill to install the heating ducts in the ceiling of the building. And he was then hired by Champion to establish a tin shop and a weld shop, and he originally built the... I'm not sure that's existing anymore. I understand they tore it out, but he built the tin shop and the welding shed here at Champion.
And who was the second in line there?
Then his son, Guy, he hired as a foreman in the tin shop. And Guy started here in October of 1909, retired in October 1957. And at the entire 47 years, he was superintendent of the tin weld, carpenters, painters, building maintenance.
And number 3 in the line?
Was my father, Bob, and he started here in 1929 and worked 38 years, and he died while working here.
Now, you started here under a little different circumstances than the other two. When was that, and what were the circumstances?
My first time here was in 1945. I started here on my 16th birthday during the Second World War. And
that was a little unusual for a 16-year-old to be in the mill, but not at that time, right?
Not at that time. They were hiring a lot of 16-year-olds at that time. They had lowered the age from 18 to 16 during wartime. I worked in number 2 mill finishing, wrapping sealing paper, helping trimmer operators, hauling broke, whatever was needed at that time, with the expectation of working after school when I went back to high school. Not knowing that the union was going to attempt to get into Champion in the fall of that year, and they let about 450 of us go. So that ended my short career here in September of 1945.
There were about 450 people about that age?
As I remember it, yes.
Because there were over 700 men who left Champion during the war, so that would make sense. Then you ventured somewhere else after high school.
Well, I went to the Baldwin Lima Hamilton Corporation and worked there for 10 months. And left there in April of 1948, walked across the bridge and asked for a job, and at 7 o'clock in the morning, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was on 10 paper machine loading broke.
And except for some time in the service during the Korean War, you remained here till when?
I left here January the 1st of 1992.
And of course it wasn't always handling broke.
No, 1951. June of 1951, I transferred into the maintenance department, into the electrical department, and I was there until 1992.
You saw some changes take place in the mill from 1945 till the time you left here.
Quite a few, yes. A lot of changes. A a lot of computer equipment. We were working off of relays and belts and drive motors with belts and big pulleys on them, and when I left here, everything was being computer driven. That's why I left.
Computer age caught up with you?
Right.
Have a lot of company there. Also, I think your wife had a connection with Champion for a while.
My wife worked here in 1950 and 51, and she left in July of 52 while I was in service and came to Texas with me. But while she was here, she was Reuben Robertson Jr.'s secretary.
And of course, Reuben Robertson Jr. was kind of a legend around here. What are some of your memories and impressions of the man?
The greatest impression, his door was always open. He was always friendly and a gentleman, a great gentleman. But my greatest impression of him was that I was gone for 2 years in service. And the week that I came back, the first time I came into the office building, he left his desk and came down the hall and greeted me, shook my hand, welcomed me back, wanted to know how my wife was and how did I, wanted to know about my service time. And I had some doubt as to whether he would even remember me. But he wasn't the type of person that forgot anybody.
I understand from others I've talked to that was an unusual trait, that he remembered people and had a way to make them feel comfortable.
Always. I never went into his office to see my wife that he wasn't friendly. Some executives aren't that way. I just have great memories of the man as being a true gentleman.
And of course, his career came to a tragic premature end. What are some of your recollections of that time?
I was working that night, probably working the 12 to 8 shift, because I was in plant protection when they called in and said that he had been killed that evening. And I know it was quite a shock to everyone. It's a great tragedy.
Some people seem to think that was kind of a turning point in this company.
Most of us that were here thought it was a turning point, but I think the turning point was there. And Reuben really did not want to break up the family tradition, and I think at that point the family tradition had to be broken. It's personal feelings.
Some of your most pleasant and treasured memories of working at Champion would be?
Gosh, there's so many of them I really don't know. There's both kinds of memories. I enjoyed most of the years that I worked here. When I started in the electric gang, and it was brought to my attention yesterday by Mr. Adams, who was our boss at that time, there were 88 people in the electric department. There's way less than 30 right now. But we did everything in this mill. There were no outside contractors. We did all construction work, all machine rebuilds, had shutdowns every holiday, and that was a must for maintenance. We were told when we came to work here that we would work all holidays. And we did. We worked 20-hour days on holidays. But we had a good time. The guys all had fun. There was great camaraderie in the crafts at that time.
I've mentioned before in some other interviews about the sense of loyalty that the employees and former employees have. Is that something that's always been there? Or?
I think it was. I don't think anybody really wanted the union to come into this plant. I know none of the older employees did. I don't necessarily say it's a bad thing, but at that time I think we were all family oriented and company oriented. You can't grow up in the neighborhood and have all your family work here and not know that Champion's a great place.
You mentioned growing up in the neighborhood. You lived almost across the street from the mill, right?
I did. I lived the third house from B Street, straight across from this office building.
On Ray Avenue, where there's now a parking lot.
Yes. Yes.
And some of those houses and others in the area were owned by Champion and built by Champion.
Most all of the houses in that area were owned by Champion. I think there were 2 on Ray Avenue that weren't. The house we lived in was owned by Champion, acquired in a rather unusual way. The lady that owned it would not sell to Champion. And Champion gave my grandfather the money to go buy the house, and he bought the house for his son and then deeded it right back over to Champion. And We lived there until they moved the houses, and they gave the house to my parents, and it's now 606 Ross Avenue.
We mentioned you're starting here during World War II. Your ancestors mentioned any unusual things about World War I in the mill?
Well, the one that I really remember is my grandfather talking about being issued a shotgun as part of the home guard to protect Champion and Hamilton from the enemy. And that's about all I ever heard about it, except I still have the shotgun.
There was the fear that the Germans could actually land and possibly get to Ohio and do damage to the paper mill.
I guess they thought so. I really didn't. You know, the story has never been elaborated on, but I just know that my grandfather was issued a shotgun.
Well, thank you very much for some of your recollections, and we have been with Bill Compton talking about his being the fourth generation to work here at Champion, and like many other people in Hamilton, Champion being part of the family. One of the most popular aspects of the Champion 100th anniversary celebration has been the memorabilia display on North 3rd Street. A person who has been very responsible for that is Bill Compton. Bill, first of all, how did the memorabilia display originate?
Well, they were having executive meetings to figure out what to do for the 100th anniversary at Knightsbridge. And I was asked to attend some meetings because I've kind of collected memorabilia for years. And during the discussions there, they decided to set up some kind of a memorabilia display. At that time, we had no idea what we were going to do.
And of course, the memorabilia display has emphasized the people of Champion. What are some of the things that a person would see in that display?
Well, we have a complete room of everyone in Champion who has ever been in service. We have the Champions in War and Peace. We have a replica of the old company store. We have some display of practically every activity that has been, everyone that's been active in any type of activity at Champion. We have the ball teams and the Geo Girls, the Fleetfoot Tribe, Champion Management Association, the Lady Champion Contest.
And company publications too, I think, are also in that.
We have almost a complete collection of the old Champion logs that people can go through.
And the log was a monthly publication, company publication, was published out of here, I believe.
Right. It originally was published out of Canton. The log was a Canton newspaper, and then they incorporated it into the Hamilton Canton Mill in 1935, and it became a company publication, basically done from Hamilton, though. The original publisher was Reuben Robertson, Jr. But they had a newsletter here prior to that. They had the Champion News and the Champion Activity magazine, and that went back to the 20s someplace.
I would assume that this is a project that's involved a lot of people.
There's been a large committee involved in this project, and it's been a long project. We started talking seriously about the memorabilia in August of last year. We have been setting it up, physically setting it up, since the first week of March, and it's been a large, hard-working committee.
And all volunteers, right?
Almost 100% retirees.
And again, kind of a spirit there that we've seen throughout this celebration of a lot of pride and loyalty.
I think more so with the retirees. I think there is a lot of pride in the company, and they all know what they've had and what the company's done for them. Been a very good group.
Once again, one of the most popular displays has been the memorabilia display, which has recalled the part that many Hamiltonians have played not only in the history of this company, but in many of the activities and other things that this company has been responsible for in its century in Hamilton.
Well, with all the interviewing you've been doing, it's about time we turn the tables.
Put the shoe on the other foot today.
Definitely. I hope you enjoy it.
Yes.
We're sitting out here in front of Champion International, listening to the fountains in the background on a lovely August morning. What could be more pleasant than this?
I can't think of anything.
Butler County historian Jim Blunt, you have written an incredible book, 100 Years of Papermaking. Your characters literally leaped off the page.
Thank you.
Especially people like Peter Thompson. We talk a lot about vision today in corporations, but this guy was living it back in 1893.
Yes. And as usual with the entrepreneurs of that period, he was taking a big risk because he was going into a new product and going into it in a big way, and had $100,000 that he had made on a deal a few years before, and it could have gone down the drain very easily.
I was trying to get kind of a handle on what exactly epitomizes character. I think the word's hard work more than anything else.
Hard work, and I think he had a loyalty to his mission, and he expected people to be loyal to him. And he rewarded them for their loyalty, and I think that's why they're here 100 years later.
When you think of the handicaps that he surmounted, 2 world wars, the Great Depression, various economic slumps, which you as a historian can talk knowledgeably about, fires, floods, every single time disaster hit, he came back.
That's right, and when he started the company in 1893, when he incorporated it, that was the start of one of our worst depressions, actually the second worst in our history, and which lasted for several years. And paper companies were folding up, but they were the traditional paper companies. They weren't the coated paper companies, and he had the patience and the hard work and that vision, and lasted through. And by the time that depression was over, Champion was a major international corporation already. What he did was saw a need through the development of offset printing, and not offset, but halftone printing, to produce a paper that would reproduce that, because they had the process to print the pictures, but they didn't have the paper. So he came up with a paper that would have a smooth texture instead of the rough edges that is on traditional paper.
And the advent of magazines and all the advertising had a lot to do with that too.
Magazines were really almost not a factor in our economy or in our lives at that time. And again, he had the vision to know that within the next 10 or 12 years with this printing process, you had magazines then that had circulation of over 1 million, and he was part of that.
Peter Thompson also hired a lot of mountain people right out of Kentucky.
Yes, that became really a company policy that these people, number one, needed a job because of the adversity in Kentucky at that time. The coal mining industry was down, and he started hiring them and found that they were good workers. They were flexible and adaptive. They could fix something because they had lived in the mountains or in rural areas where there was not, as we would have today, a hardware store or a store where you could get something fixed, or a person that you could call to get something fixed. So they could fix things with baling wire, or look at something and find a way to keep it operating. Plus, they became very loyal to the company. His loyalty to them too, and so it became a company policy to hire people from the mountains of Kentucky and Tennessee, West Virginia, but especially Kentucky, as we know.
I like the part about a suitcase being called a Hamilton in Kentucky.
Right.
When you packed a suitcase, it meant you were going to Hamilton.
Yes, right. And that was established early. At least the story that someone went into a small store in central part of Kentucky in about 1906 and heard someone ask for a Hamilton, and the store owner went to the back and came out with a suitcase and handed it to the person, sold it to the person, and the person asked, what's a Hamilton? He said, well, that's a suitcase because so many people are moving to Hamilton, and so we just call that a Hamilton around here.
All the work in those early days was done by hand. I read your account of people toting and lifting.
Yes, the coating of paper, we talk, a word that's been in our business vocabulary for many years is labor intensive, and I can't think of anything that was more labor intensive than coating paper. They literally ran under the paper as it was going, and not only applied the coating but brushed the excess off and kept it running, and very, not only hard work but very hot work, very difficult hot work, and there was a lot of waste. Some of it didn't work, but very hard work.
Peter Thompson believed in hard work so thoroughly that his 2 sons, Alexander and Logan, began at the lowest possible level in the mills when they were 16 and 18 years old.
That was true with many of the young men in that family, is that they came usually to the Hamilton Mill for their first job, got the lowest job in the plant, and then went to a succession of jobs where they learned the paper making from the ground up.
Alexander was president from 1931 to 1935, right smack in the middle of the Depression. But the Depression didn't really affect Hamilton and Champion International that much.
No, in fact, Champion was unique in that they lowered their production slightly, but still they were operating most of the time 6 days and at least 5 days, and no one was laid off. Some men who had been working maybe 7 days a week with overtime had to cut back to 5 days, but certainly that was no comparison to people who were out of their jobs entirely. And one of the phenomena I ran into in interviewing for this was over the years and interviewing people on many other things, depression is something that left a mark on their life and changed their life. And they lived with it until they died. And in some cases, when I talked to some of these old-time Champion employees and I asked them, what do you remember about the depression, they had to think a while. It wasn't something that where a whole stream of bad memories came out. They had to think, well, what did we do? And basically it was changing the product. They did not produce as much coated paper, higher price paper, because there weren't the people around to buy it. The businesses weren't buying it. And they went to more simpler forms of paper and either sold it or stockpiled it and kept people working. And I think, I can't remember the figure, but the Hamilton merchants, of course, were very appreciative, because that Champion paycheck was the lifeblood of many Hamilton businesses through the Depression.
One of your statistics, which I found enormously fascinating, and correct me now if I get this a little wrong, 1932, 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, 95% capacity the mill was running.
Yes.
In 1932, that was right smack in the middle of the Depression.
Yes. That was the election year, Hoover versus Roosevelt, and the only issue was how are we going to get out of the Depression? And of course that was followed within a few months by the bank collapse and the worst part of the Depression. And yes, Champion was running. By 1934, they were hiring. And in 1936, they were on a massive hiring program because they were expanding at the end of the Depression and selling more product. And also, they had prospered during the 1920s. They did not spend all that money. They had some money to spend for capitalization during the Depression.
As I looked at your chart of presidents, all the way from Peter Thompson to his sons Alexander and Logan, all the way, was it Reuben Robertson?
Reuben Robertson Jr.
The son-in-law, and then the son after that, and then finally Carl Bendetson.
Yes.
They all seem to share a very similar vision.
Yes, they did. Of course, Bendetson was the first first person who was not a member of the family who was in control, and that was a major change. But yes, they did. And again, it was that vision that they inherited from, I think, Peter G., because the coated paper that they produced in the 1890s would not have sold in the 1930s or 40s or 50s. And so there were constant improvement. And of course, one of those was Chrome Coat, which was developed in 1929, right before the Depression. And because of the Depression and World War II restrictions, it really wasn't marketed in big scale until the 1950s. Late 1940s and early 1950s. And again, the resilience of the company to take a product that had been on the drawing board for many, many years and do nothing with it for almost 20 years.
When Carl Bendetson came here in 1960 as president and, of course, facilitated the Knightsbridge facility, named after the knight, I remember being intrigued by that too. He also was a man ahead of his time in that he was into the environment and recycling and all that sort of thing. My goodness, 30 years before it became
well, and as I recall, the environmental movement started with Silent Spring.
Rachel Carson,
in '62, and right, Champion was a leader in a group of businesses and other people who were interested in improving the quality of the water in the Great Miami River way before it was fashionable and way before there were government mandates to do that type of thing. And I can remember growing up in this town, and there used to be the joke, the color of the river reflected the color of the paper that Champion was making at that time, which was a slight exaggeration because Champion wasn't the only contributor to that. But yes, they're way ahead of their time on that.
Amazing. Was it true about all of the ash waste was thoroughly recycled to the tune of 90 to 95 to 100%, so that there was literally no waste at all?
Yes, that's a fairly recent, in the 1980s. Of course, finding a landfill for that has become increasingly difficult, nearly impossible, because people just don't want it, the old NIMBY, not in my backyard syndrome.
Right.
And of course, we went through a very traumatic period here in the late 1980s when there was the possibility that Champion was going to open a landfill out in the county. But they won environmental awards for their creativity in handling that problem.
You talk about growing up in Hamilton. One fixture that I have been told many times about is the steam whistle that used to go off 7 times a day. And I've been told that at 5 p.m. when it went off, you could just see the kids in the playgrounds immediately scatter in all directions because that was when they were supposed to be home.
I lived through that, and I lived in Fortune Heights as a boy, and we were able to hear that whistle plus several others. There was a whole chorus at times of plant whistles in Hamilton, and as a child you learned to listen for those. You could block out a lot of sounds, but when you heard one of those, you had to stop and think, is this the time I'm supposed to be home for dinner or what? And I've interviewed probably a few dozen people on the Champion Project who were not associated with Champion, and asked them about the plant whistles and what they remember about it. And they all say, it was a part of my life as a child.
Those memories are still very firmly entrenched. Yes. Let's jump back just a little bit.
Okay.
World War II, Champion International was absolutely vital in some of the government programs of World War II. You mentioned ration cards, for example.
Of course, every industry was threatened at the beginning of World War II because of the need of manpower and materials. And there was the fear that paper would not be considered a war material. But very quickly, I remember one of the examples they gave was how many millions of maps that it took to conduct maneuvers in the summer of 1940. And every man, as I recall, had over 20 maps. Every soldier had over 20 maps. Well, that required paper. And then the government got into rationing programs, and anyone who lived through that knows that was a matter of paperwork, a lot of paperwork, not only the booklets that contained the stamps, but the instructions that went along with it, posters, any number of things. So. And then in that era, of course, cigarettes had a little different position in our economy, and also in the morale of the men and women in the service. And so they were trying to find a way to provide the men and women in the service with a maximum number of cigarettes, but without using the old tinfoil lining that was inside the package. And Champion in their laboratories here in Hamilton came up with a paper substitute for that, and was shipping millions of tons of that paper during the war, and became a very critical product. And
you also mentioned the role of women at Champion International, when it wasn't Champion International, of course, during World War II. When the boys came home and the women were expected to give up their jobs, a lot of them didn't want to give up those jobs. There
was a slight difference. In World War I, there were a few women, and they gave up their jobs. But World War I didn't last very long. World War II, there were about 700 men out of that mill who left, and some women also. And in Hamilton here, there were almost monthly, you saw reports where there was a need for over 1,000 workers. And there weren't the men to do that. So they turned to women, and of course in many cases they found out that women did some jobs a lot better than men, were a little more meticulous and so on and so forth. And it was the opening. Some of them stayed on their jobs after the war, but as you said, some of them were sent back to other jobs. I think everybody who wanted to stay was allowed to stay, though. It was not as arbitrary as it was in some other places where they said, okay, the guys are back, goodbye, girls.
But that's typical of Champion to take care of its employees, and that has endured for the last 100 years.
That loyalty that comes into focus so many times in the last 100 years, both ways, by the employees and the company.
You pointed that out. One name that really stood out for me was Emma Cook during the flood of 1913. Tell us about what she did.
She had started in a very lowly job and had gotten to a position in the sample room. And the sample room is what it sounds like, took different samples of paper and would put packages together that could be given to customers or prospective customers. And she had cutting instruments so she could cut them and things of that nature. They knew the 1913 flood was coming. They had no idea of the severity of it. And she stayed after employees were told to leave, putting her samples and her instruments in the highest possible place in the office, thinking that the water would never get there, and had to literally be told to leave and forced to leave by her boss. And then the disappointment of coming back after the flood and finding that the flood did reach them. and some of them had floated away. Some of the instruments had floated away.
Several of those employees really did risk
Yes,
their lives
yes,
to save the company.
Yes. Climbing across wires across B Street to get from one mill to the other, diving into water several times to salvage boilers and well, after the fire started, of course, also to connect up a hose for water that could be pumped onto the fire and things of that nature. But yes, numerous times that would happen.
Champion's public conscience was never more in evidence than immediately following the flood when they supplied the water and electricity to the entire west side.
That's right. The flood had, of course, knocked down all the bridges, all 4 bridges, and it had taken out with it all the utility lines and all the generating and treatment was on the east side of the river. So the west side at first appeared to be in the worst shape of any part of Hamilton, even though very little of the flood had reached the west side. But in the end, they turned out to be the luckiest because, again, because of the company and its employees, they were able to connect up with Champion's electric generating facilities, which somehow had been spared by the flood, even though they were underwater, and also its ability to pump water. And so that was fed into the west side homes and businesses for about 5 to 6 weeks. And then incredibly, at the end of the time, of course, the city offered to pay for the service that Champion had provided. And Peter Thompson, in a very curt reply to the mayor, said, no, we didn't do this to be paid or to make money. And furthermore, since you have the money to pay us, why don't you just reduce the cost of the utilities to the citizens of Hamilton by that much instead of paying us.
Did they do that?
Yes, they did.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Of course, at that time, everybody was looking for anything they could get because
Yes.
the tragedy was just
They were
so
desperate.
immense. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. Well, today, Champion International is the largest employer in the city, over
Yes.
1,400 employees.
Right.
And in 1992, city employees or Hamilton Champion International employees paid over $2 million in city income taxes.
Right.
Hal Shepard was quoted on that one.
Yes, and of course, and I think it's easy sometimes to look at those figures, the tax figures. What we don't see is the time that Champion employees put in this community, and that was one of the I think the untold stories that we go back and look at our United Way, look back in its history, and about a third of the time the drive has been headed by someone from Champion. And in many years, particularly of course during the 30s, during the Depression we talked about earlier, Champion employees were the principal contributors to United Way, Red Cross, other charitable institutions. And in recent years, Champion has been a key player in things like food banks, helping on projects of that type. That's through the United Paperworkers Union and the company both working on that. I know when I started inquiring around in that, I came up with much more material than I could possibly use in the book.
Yeah. To what extent do you think that public conscience has a lot to do with 100 years of success?
Oh, I think it does. I think none of us exist or operate in a little cubicle by ourselves, and what happens at Champion affects Hamilton, and what happens in Hamilton affects Champion. And again, I think Peter Thompson obviously knew that. He was the man who got the YMCA started with the first $10,000 contribution, and then later on some more.
Miami's Hamilton
campus of Miami
right?
University, a perfect example. And much later, in the 1960s, there was also a story I came across back in the days when polio was such a terror in the early 50s. There was all the iron lungs in Cincinnati were in use during the summer in the early 50s, and there were 1 or 2 spare iron lungs, fortunately, that weren't being used here in Hamilton. They needed one within minutes in Cincinnati. And who did they turn to? They turned to Champion. Champion sent a truck. They sent additional people to load the truck. And then with police and sheriffs and highway patrol, a Champion truck at breakneck speed went to Cincinnati Children's Hospital and delivered an iron lung that saved at least a life at that time. And a lot of little things like that. In the 40s, right after World War II, we had a series of coal strikes, that caught this city and every business without coal to produce electricity. And we were on the verge of having no electricity in the city of Hamilton. Champion had about a 3-week stockpile and gave Hamilton enough coal to operate, and fortunately within a couple days after that gift, the strike was over and the shipments resumed. But, as I say, it works both ways. Some people look at tax abatement as giving something away. Champion's got some tax abatements recently, and I would have to look. I'd say we're paying them back, and
Absolutely.
we certainly can't afford to lose them.
The mutual loyalty is something that comes out very clearly in your book. You interviewed, I know, Bill Compton, a fourth-generation Champion employee, and you also talked about how people would start their relatives in the corporation.
Yes, and of course, again, it goes back to hiring the mountain people and there being reliable people and having a loyalty. One of the company policies was that if you worked at the mill and you were a good employee, chances are your brothers, sisters, children would also be the same type of employee. And if you recommended them, they would probably be hired about 99% of the time. On your side of that, if you were reluctant to recommend a cousin or niece or nephew or son or daughter who wasn't a good worker, because that would shut it off for everybody else in your family, and everyone else then would be locked out of that, that succession.
That's one of my favorite stories about Champion International. You mentioned that you had a lot of stories you had to leave out because there simply wasn't room in your book. Give us a sample of something that you felt leaped off the page, but you just couldn't include.
It's hard to say. I just so many examples of people who were injured on the job or sick and went to work and were so proud of not missing a day or missing only 1 or 2 days in 40 or so many years. Frank Burns, who is mentioned in the book, worked there for 48 years without missing a day. Was involved in an accident where he did chop off the very tips of his fingers, had him bandaged in the mill and went back to work. I used him in the book, but I probably interviewed at least 2 or 3 dozen people who were very proud of the fact that they had years or an entire career where they never missed a day of work.
Your book is available on a variety of sites right now?
Yes. The Lane Library branches all have a copy. Butler County Historical Society, there was one donated to each of the school libraries in Hamilton and Fairfield. Miami University Library. And if somebody knows somebody at Champion, they might inquire. There might be a few available.
And it's called 100 Years of Papermaking,
right.
The History of Champion International. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Blunt, Butler County historian.
Thank you very much.
Sitting out here listening to the fountains, this has been most pleasant.
Yes.
I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. An ability to adjust, a willingness to grow, an intense loyalty to both employees and the community. Ask anyone involved with Champion International why the corporation has been so successful for so long, and you'll hear those common threads. That's Champion International. Thanks for joining us.
You're watching TV Hamilton, your local origination station.